The North Country is a graying place, both for people who live here and people who are likely to move here. They're more likely to be retirees or second home buyers than younger people. So we've been scouting out those on the lower end of the demographic scale and asking, how'd you get here? What'd you do? Why do you stay? Our North Country at Work project reports back on a construction worker who found a perfect fit. That's today's story of the day.
Support for Story of the Day comes from Pearsall Wealth Management at UBS Wealth Management USA. Subsidiary UBS AG, member FINRA, SIPC. 1 Broad Street Plaza, Glens Falls. And the New York State Caregiving and Respite Coalition, seeking volunteers aged 55 plus to support family caregivers in northern and central New York. Visit nyscrc.org/AmeriCorps.
Hey, I'm David Sommerstein. It's Monday, February 24th. First up, New York's Department of Corrections issued disciplinary actions over the weekend to corrections officers continuing to strike at state prisons. Today marks the second week of wildcat strikes at prisons across the state. It's illegal for state employees to go on strike, so corrections officers may have their pay docked and their state-sponsored health insurance terminated. Mediation between the Department of Corrections and the Corrections Officers Union is ongoing. Today, the debate moved to the Capitol in Albany. Jimmy Vilkind reports for the New York Public News Network.
The spouses of striking correctional officers are pushing lawmakers to improve safety in New York State prisons. The women stood with Republicans as they try to repeal the HALT law, which restricts the use of solitary confinement. Bernadette Singer, whose husband works at the Collins Correctional Facility in Erie County, took her case to the New York State Capitol.
We should not have to be here right now.
Prison officials working for the governor are serving legal notices to demonstrating guards. Their wildcat strike is against the law and not sanctioned by the union. The state says striking officers could lose their health insurance. Bernadette was undeterred.
We are not going to be bullied into submission. We're not going to give up this fight. We are going to continue to hold the line. We will talk to every senator. We will knock on every single door.
Advocates of the 2021 HALT law say it makes conditions in prisons more humane. HALT doesn't ban solitary commitment outright, but it means guards have to be more selective about when they use it and give people breaks from extended isolation. Anthony Dixon was incarcerated for 30 years. He says Hochul shouldn't give in to the correctional officers' demands.
We're negotiating with terrorists. These officers, if they don't represent the union, so who is the governor even negotiating with?
Talks between prison officials and the union representing correctional officers are ongoing. In Albany, I'm Jimmy Vilkind for the New York Public News Network.
Over the weekend, Governor Kathy Hochul slipped a measure into her budget to close up to 5 more prisons. Last year's budget included a similar measure, but she only closed 2, one in Washington County. In a press release, fellow Democrat Assemblyman Billy Jones of the North Country called on Hochul to reverse her plan. He said that closing prisons is, quote, no way to address the valid concerns from these hardworking men and women to end the work stop. $1,000. That's the amount Governor Hochul says families should be eligible to receive as a tax credit for each child. But the governor is getting pushback on that from progressive lawmakers in the state. Jung-Yoon Han reports for the New York Public News Network.
Hochul's proposal would triple the child tax credit for eligible families in New York. It's one part of her affordability agenda this year. John Liu is a Democratic state senator from Queens.
So we thank Governor Hochul for putting forward her proposal, but it doesn't go far enough. We need the working families tax credit enacted now.
Liu and others are backing a proposal called the Working Families Tax Credit, which would give eligible families up to $1,600 per child. Those progressive lawmakers say the proposal, which State Senator Andrew Gennardis is sponsoring, has the approval of a poverty action research group that Hochul called together to research this exact issue. A spokesperson for Hochul said she'll consider the Working Families Tax Credit if it passes both in the Assembly and the Senate. In Albany, I'm Jung-Yoon Han for the New York Public News Network.
The North Country's population has shrunk by about 4% over the last decade. At the same time, the average resident has gotten older. So over the past few months, we've been talking to young people who've been moving here, asking them why and how. In today's North Country at Work story, how a love of the outdoors brought a recent college graduate to Westport. Anna Williams-Bergen has more.
Evan Whitman is 23. He grew up in Pennsylvania and went to college there. When he graduated, he was looking for someplace new.
I decided that I wanted to be somewhere out of a city, working, making money instead of being a student.
Whitman's parents are 46ers. He grew up coming to the Adirondacks to hike and camp. So he started looking for work here and jumped at the first opportunity he got, working for a contractor in Westport.
I guess you would call it facade installer. Many different things, whether it's gutter work, siding, roofing. It's mostly just outside on the house, on the face of the house, so the facade.
Whitman works for Haas Stone and Steel, which mostly does high-end roofing.
This is a great opportunity for me to learn skills that I can then take with me my entire life, however long that is, and hopefully produce things of my own.
Whitman studied social sciences in college, and this was his first real job after graduation. So in addition to roofing, Whitman was also just learning how to be on a job site.
Keeping track of tools is like, oh my, woohoo, hard, difficult. You know, everything's got to be sent every which way, and you don't want to waste money just buying like 3 of something that you wouldn't be using simultaneously.
In addition to all the tools, there's gear, basically climbing equipment to keep everyone safe when they're working up high.
For things that require it, we will rope up and harness up and then have, scaffolding with picks running and guards and all that kind of thing. A lot of our work we try to do like from a lift or having a lift like right below us so we can just kind of like bring the pan up or a couple pans up with the lift and then you just put it right on the roof and, the machinery goes a long way.
About 7 months in, Whitman got his first solo job, putting gutters on a house in Keene Valley.
And it was definitely daunting at first, but once I got like my first full run of like 40 feet, maybe 50 feet of gutter, something like that, and then a downspout perfectly set, I was like, I'm good. Like I can do this, get it done, we're good.
As Whitman was settling into work, he was also building a life in Westport. At 23, there aren't a ton of people his age here, but he's an old soul, so he says it's no problem.
My young people are 30 to 35. Like that's my crew.
Whitman was in a community theater production in Essex, and even a local real estate ad. He loves the outdoors, so he's really enjoyed living in the Adirondacks through all 4 seasons.
I came up here in January, dead of winter. My boss was like, you're getting a great introduction here. And I was like, yeah, like I loved it. And it was supposed to be, the worst of it.
Whitman says he'd stay outside in the cold forever if he could.
The first job that I was on, for the most part, was up in Tupper Lake, right on sort of the water side, though at that point it was ice, and covered with snow. And it was just so serene. I'm also like a pretty avid bird watcher, and all the winter birds, I was just like, oh yeah, this is great.
Whitman was settled into life in the Adirondacks, but sometimes stuff happens. Whitman had to leave the Adirondacks this winter for family reasons. He's currently doing seasonal trail work in Maine, but he hopes to return to the Adirondacks in the future. For North Country Public Radio's North Country at Work project, I'm Anna Williams-Bergen in Westport.
This story is part of North Country at Work's Next Generation project, which highlights stories from the region's young workers. If you have a story in mind, we want to hear it. Just text the word NEXT to 315-978-6277. Again, text the word NEXT to 315-978-6277. You can also email us at work@ncpr.org. Amy Fireisel contributed to this story. Okay, here are a few of the new names for Story of the Day that I've gotten recently. Anorthosite, that's a kind of granite in the Adirondacks. News Poutine, Northern Angles, North Country Considered. You get a theme here. It doesn't have to be a theme, but I do need a new name for Story of the Day. I'm sick of this old one. So your help is graciously requested. Help me name this show. Send your ideas to david@ncpr.org. That's david@ncpr.org. Thank you so much. More news all the time at ncpr.org. Music today by Alan Dunham of Glens Falls and Gretchen Kohler and Daniel Kelly of Potsdam. I'm David Summerstein.